This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jaden Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 436 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Buczko, and today we will do a little mailbag episode to answer the questions that you have sent us over on Twitter, and for that I've brought some more competent help because along with me here is Lars Pollmann. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I'm fascinated by the length of our intro because I can't hear it or couldn't hear it this time, and I was just watching the Audacity bar go on and on and on. But other than that, Stefan, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good too. Are you enjoying the World Cup or following it at all, or what are you doing?
I mean, being a football journalist, I don't think I had the opportunity to boycott the World Cup in Qatar, which otherwise I probably wouldn't have, to be quite honest, because it's not my fault. The tournament has been given to a corrupt nation of homophobes and murderers, basically. I am enjoying the football quite a bit. I've always maintained that while I don't like international games, I do like tournament football. I know there's a bit of a disconnect between those two statements, but it still rings true for me, and I think for a lot of people, I think the World Cup, even despite all the negativity around it and earned negativity around it, it's still the World Cup, and I'm still going to watch it. So, and I'm still holding out hope for my prediction of Argentina winning, despite them not looking too great so far.
Oh, well, you don't have to be great during the first group phase and then the first couple of knockout games to win a tournament, as I think Spain, was it, when they won the Euros, demonstrated, who did they pounce for nothing in the final? I can't remember.
Italy?
Italy, exactly. But I do remember them being shied throughout. Obviously, I haven't seen much of the World Cup, but I've occasionally watched some games because despite all the homophobia and human rights violations, I must say it does look nice on my 4K television. I've seen a couple of games. I've seen some of Germany's performances and whatnot, but obviously we're not here to talk about the World Cup, but so far I'm happy that so many of Dortmund's players are already out of the tournament and have not so far picked up an injury, so that obviously is nice. But obviously there are also some other news, and before we start with questions, because we didn't get asked about that, I thought I'll include it, however, and that is of course that assistant coach Peter Hermann has asked for his release due to health reasons. Obviously he is 70 years old, and Dortmund gladly obliged, and I think it needed even some convincing by Terzic for him to even take this job. I think he just wanted to retire, so I'm not entirely sure what his health reasons are, but either way, I wish Peter Hermann all the best. And my question to you, Lars, is what does that mean for Dortmund, and who do you want to see as a successor? I think the official statement read that Dortmund will announce a successor or someone else who will take or fill this role in the next couple of days. I don't know, might be weeks. I have no idea how long this process takes, but either way, take it away, Lars.
I mean, nobody really knows what exactly he did for these almost 6 months as assistant to Edin Terzic. I mean, he was presented as the experienced elder statesman of sorts in the coaching staff, but I don't necessarily have any details on his exact role. So in that sense, it's also difficult for me to say who should replace him, because do you just want someone with age and experience to guide Terzic a bit through the season, which if that was Peter Hermann's role so far, he hasn't done the greatest of jobs, I would say. Or do you want someone who can maybe give more of a tactical input, given what has happened in the season so far? I don't know. I haven't spent more than 20 seconds on this subject, and quite frankly, I don't think it's something that's going to make or break Dortmund's season. So ultimately, I think they will announce something in the not so distant future. Wouldn't be surprised if it's a temporary solution, because most good assistant coaches aren't freely available during the season. So maybe they need someone till the end of the season, then take another look at it.
Well, I think you should do it, to be honest. If anyone has proved to be qualified for this position via this podcast and other means, I think it's you. But in the meantime, you can answer this question from Grant at GPJacob1 on Twitter asks, how crucial do you think the returns of Dahoud and Jamie Bynoe-Gittens will be to the team's success in the Rückrunde? Plus the 2 other games, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't want to be the smartass, so I wasn't going to mention that, Stefan, but thanks that you did it. I mean, the question is obviously whom Dahoud and Bynoe-Gittens would replace out of the, let's say, standard starting 11 that we've seen towards the end of the first part of the season, to not call it Hinrunde. And presumably that would be for Dahoud, Salih Özcan, who started really well at Dortmund, but I think was kind of overplayed, as we would say in German. So he kind of looked a bit tired after the move to Dortmund, playing in a 3-day rhythm for the first time in his career. And Bynoe-Gittens would presumably push Malen or Azar or Adeyemi towards the bench, whoever played in these games on the wings, maybe even Reina. If Bynoe-Gittens is even deemed a player capable of starting regularly for Dortmund at this point. I mean, he had a few very good moments early on in the season before he popped his shoulder, but he's still a teenager with some growing up to do in a footballing sense. So it,
also in a normal sense, I would say.
Yeah, I don't want to presume. I mean, I think Jude Bellingham at that age didn't need to grow up too much as a person. Maybe others have it a bit more differently, but it's certainly going to be a boost to get those two back. You would assume that they won't have too big of an issue coming back, because they didn't have muscular issues or whatever. They had their shoulder injuries, but they've been back running for quite some time. So you would hope that they won't take too long to get reintegrated into team training. And then obviously the game starting from, I think, Augsburg on like the 24th or so of January. So yeah, certainly a boost, but I wouldn't hold out the highest of expectations just because Bynoe-Gittens is so young, might not be a starter, and Dahoud versus Özcan, I don't know how much of an upgrade that is all around. I mean, Dahoud and has much more competency on the ball. I think Özcan is a better defender, as it were. So I think the best part is then going to be that Terzic has the option of choosing instead of having to play Özcan basically full term if the alternative is Emre Can.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, we have a question from longtime listener Steve Berkowitz, who has asked, what would you like to see from Terzic in terms of tactics and lineups when the season resumes? Now, obviously, I would tie these two together a little bit, and I personally think that I would like to see a Dahoud, Özcan, and Bellingham midfield trio more often than not in a 4-3-3 system. because of, let's say, to make up for Jude Bellingham's lack of tactical discipline, because he does like to roam and play as an attacking midfielder half the time, and I think that leaves gaps open. And if you pair that with Emre Can, for example, in a double pivot, who also likes to leave everything open, even if he doesn't roam forward just by ill positioning, as we saw in the loss against Gladbach, may I remind anyone who has blissfully forgotten about it since, I think for some added stability and also just some ball circulation, because I think that has been a problem, overall ball retention, ball circulation, the positional play. I think having Dahoud in there somewhere would improve that, and at least in my silly little mind would help an issue or fix an issue. I don't know, but at least be a small remedy to the Jude Bellingham moving forward extravaganza, which sometimes leaves you butt naked open as the back, and then you receive punishment, which you do not want, as I think we all agree as Dortmund fans or observers that the Black and Yellows have conceded far too many goals in the first stint of the season. So, let's move on with a question that I think you can answer better than me when I find it here, and it is from @BrunnstadtBVB. That is, of course, the fan club from Kansas City, and they ask, should BVB go after some players that had great World Cup performances in the winter transfer window? I don't think they should, but I wanted to hear your thoughts.
I mean, the operative word might not be should, but could. Because players who have had a great World Cup usually are not necessarily within Dortmund's price range. Certainly not during this winter, because we don't expect Dortmund to have any sales. So no.
Yeah, plus Jude Bellingham already plays for us, so what the hell?
Yeah, there's no incoming money in terms of transfer fees, presumably. I mean, I don't necessarily buy into the umpteenth Thomas Meunier to Barca rumor. I think the guys that you would possibly look at if there was a summer transfer window, or if Bellingham, which is not going to happen, were to leave in the winter for 150 million. So if you had no financial parameters to keep in mind, you would probably look at someone like Amrabat, who's been magnificent for Morocco, who plays at Fiorentina, so he's not going to be spoiled in terms of wage packages and whatnot. You would probably also look at Mohamed Kudus of Ghana, whom Dortmund are looking at and are reportedly in quite advanced talks with his agent.
Yeah, sorry, Tio 5,000 or 500, that was your question. So, but Lars has already answered, so I'm not going to go over this. But, I think that is certainly a player to look into.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what he is at this level. Is he? I mean, at Ajax, I think he's playing as a 10 or as a false 9 or half striker or whatever, floating striker. There's all these terms for that. For Ghana, he's played in an advanced midfield position, but he's also been a right winger at the World Cup in one of these games. So obviously the positive in terms of Kudus is that Dortmund have Otto Addo in their coaching staff, who's been the national coach for Ghana at the World Cup.
For how long?
I mean, he's just said that he's leaving Ghana because he has a 2.5-year contract at Dortmund that he's going to honor. Okay. So that's not an issue, unless obviously someone comes and wants to sign him up as maybe the first team coach, which I think Dortmund wouldn't hold him back. But even then, I think Otto Addo could still sing the praises of Dortmund's development scheme for young players to Kudus, but still, that's not something that's going to happen in the winter transfer window. So, I mean, obviously, when Dortmund have had a at best mediocre season so far, there's a lot of wishful thinking that in the January transfer window there's going to be these one or two deals that completely change the complexion of a season. But historically, Dortmund aren't necessarily a team that goes hard into the January market unless there's an opportunity too good to pass up. So there's if there were another Erling Haaland on the market, but there isn't even a Manuel Akanji type situation where they identify a good talent, want to get him in early before maybe half a year later even bigger clubs come around. I wouldn't be shocked necessarily if one of those deals were to happen, but ultimately I think it's more likely than not that Dortmund are not going to make signings and consider returnees such as Dawood and Bynoe-Gittens and a couple of others as their quote-unquote winter signings.
Yeah, might even count Marco Reus into that, if I'm honest, because he was out for quite a while, even though he had some cameos, but I would really, count this as fully returned. And, there were quite a lot of games that he missed in the end. And I think he is still an important player for Dortmund, obviously. And maybe I should add to that. Do you think that Dortmund are likely to sell or loan out Nico Schulz? I think there was an Italian club that wanted to sort of pay half of his wages, but no loan fee or so. There are obviously rumors out there. Do you think there is hope for that? And I think he is also in the lineup of Dortmund's Christmas Cup against Bucharest. And if I have seen it correctly, I have not followed it closely, but Nico Schulz was also part of Dortmund's Asia tour, which obviously is a choice the club made. On top of that, do you think if he does not leave that he will be somehow more reintegrated into the matchday squad?
No, absolutely not. I mean, if Dortmund care about their public perception at all, that's a non-starter basically. I mean, even just these, with all due respect, completely irrelevant games against the Vietnam national team and Johor City Tigers. I mean, I didn't follow the Asia tour, which is obviously good for marketing and good for loyal Dortmund fans from that part of the world, but ultimately doesn't factor into anything that happens during the season here. Even then, there was a lot of backlash for them, including Schulz in the squad and even him playing. I think it's pretty obviously a ploy to get him some minutes in front of maybe a couple of scouting eyes here and there. I mean, these games are being broadcast. They not only play Bucharest on Saturday, but they also play Fiorentina. So Fiorentina, an Italian club. Schulz is, I think, half Italian. He speaks Italian, if I'm not mistaken. There is interest reportedly.
I did not know that.
Reportedly from Lazio. There was rumored to be interest from Lazio earlier in another transfer window. So if you connect the dots, I think it's pretty likely that this is all meant for him to get some minutes in a better setting than the second team, where I don't know if he actually ever ended up playing them for them in third division games, as it were. But yeah, I mean, I would be absolutely flabbergasted if they reintegrated him, not least because there's really no reason to do that, because they have Guerrero and they have Tom Rote and they have tried Azar in the first half of the season. They might still play Wolf there. Even Paslak is certainly not a worse option than Schulz, even from a pure sporting perspective. So I think any way they can shed the largest amount, if not all, of his reported 6 million a year wages, which is an absolute travesty, that's what they're looking to do.
Yeah, obviously there are also questions about Daniel Mahlen already moving on or not. At least I've seen some rumors about that. And with that, we have a question from Cincy BVB asking, if there's no improvement by the summer, should Dortmund look to move on from Mahlen and bring in a replacement or give him another chance? I mean, the rumors are about Sevilla for the coming January transfer window, if I'm not mistaken. So that seems fairly unlikely to me, just because it's going to be difficult to sign a starting level attacking player in the winter market for a club like Dortmund. But I think it's probably the
rather unpopular answer, but I would definitely look to cut my losses if Malen doesn't show improvement over the next 6 months. Because ultimately I believe in sunk cost fallacies in football, and I think trying to make Malen work for then a third season, if the first two ultimately end up in disappointments, is not the way to go. So obviously it depends on what his market situation looks like, what he wants to do. I mean, some players are happy being, in the rotation at a club like Dortmund, playing Champions League football and making good money. So that's also not something that I will begrudge any player, because they have a limited time to do the best they can in their career. So if that's what he chooses, so be it. But from Dortmund's perspective, this is certainly shaping up to be kind of a make or break period for him, especially given the fact that they are very likely to be absolutely flush with cash in the summer, and able to, thanks to presumably losing Bellingham for anything from 120 to 150 million, to kind of reshape a couple of positions here and there. So replacing Malen in the summer is definitely something I would be looking at.
All right. At Tim Snodden, or rather at Snodden Tim, but his name is Tim Snodden, I assume, asks, can we expect improvement from Schlotterbeck? Can him and Süle still work as a tandem? And I think the simple answer here is yes, because we have seen it with a lot of young center backs that, inexperience does show. And whether it be in a Germany shirt or in a Dortmund shirt, obviously he will learn from mistakes he makes, I hope. And I do very much believe that Nico Schlotterbeck can very much improve from his form currently. And I would say that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've seen him play at a higher level than he finished out the season and then played at the World Cup, which, got him ultimately dropped to the bench. But then, of course, he had this left back cameo, if I'm not mistaken, against Spain, which was fun, and had a nice pass even that should have won Germany the game. But I digress. I think this is the center back pairing of the future, and should go anything wrong, Dortmund will have a lot of homework to do, because I do not know what the capacity of one Mats Hummels will be going forward. But I'm not really that worried yet about Nico Schlotterbeck. Does he have problems in reading and anticipating the game and making quick decisions? And I think Konstantin Eckner made me aware of the first time. Yes, he does. And obviously, until he improves that, he will have flaws in his game, but I do believe that he can improve, and I'm not worried at this point. I don't know if you have anything to add, Lars, or I would just move on to the next question.
No, I think you kind of hit it. I think especially what sets Schlotterbeck apart from some of these other young centre-backs Dortmund have signed over the years. So, the Matthias Ginters of the world, or Leonardo Balerdi, if anyone remembers him. Another fantastic January signing for Dortmund. I think he kind of has the mentality of a good NFL cornerback. So he's he doesn't remember his mistakes. So if you watch the World Cup, he had this terrible second half against Japan. I think that's fair to say. He might have cost Germany the knockout stage with the second goal they conceded, even though some are making it out to be more of a Süle mistake because he played the Japan attacker onside. But I do also digress. But then obviously Schlotterbeck was dropped, as you said, but against Spain he had not only the would-be assist for Leroy Sané, if I'm not mistaken, but he also had what can only be described as a monster block of a tackle in his own box. And when you not only consider that Schlotterbeck had the issues against Japan, but he's also, I think, committed 3 fouls leading to penalties in like 12 or so national team games before then, to have the chutzpah to go into that tackle, sliding in, winning, or basically assuring Germany of a point against Spain deep in injury time, that shows that he doesn't have a mentality which is too burdened with mistakes of the past, and that's a good thing in young players, and especially young center backs.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think a lot of people have hammered Süle for his, offside trap malfunction, and also the goal that Germany conceded against Morata, I think it was, right? But I'll be honest, I really rate Niklas Süle as a center back, and I think the getting beaten by Morata on such a run and such a good pass happens to other center backs very easily too. So I don't know. I'm very happy so far with the Niklas Süle transfer. I'm not going to lie. I think him on a free transfer from Bayern Munich and to play with this, a wealth of experience, and also with the qualities that he has, I think for Borussia Dortmund and the club they are, I think he is a very decent signing. And so far, personally I'm happy, and I do see why there is room for criticism, but I think sometimes it's also a little bit overblown. But then again, every World Cup game is overreactionate to death. And with that, we move on from the centre backs to the full backs, because Ishfaq Elahi 1 asks, what are the realistic full back options for Borussia Dortmund? And maybe I should add to that, is Matteo Morey going to be a realistic option for Dortmund going forward? Now, we have seen him back on the training ground and whatnot, but obviously he will be out for 1.5 seasons basically. So I don't know if this is a transfer question or not, but I'm squeezing the Morey question in there.
I think anything you get from Morey at this point is a bonus. Ever since that devastating knee injury in the cup semi-final against Kiel, that could easily have been a career ender, and it sadly might still kind of prove to be. I mean, ultimately, there was a lot of promise with Morey coming from La Masia and looking very good in preseason games, but then he never really got the chance. And then Terzic took over, and suddenly Morey had his 5 minutes in the sun, a couple of games here and there, in which he really looked good, in which you could kind of see Dortmund have two playmaking fullbacks with Morey on the right side and Guerrero on the left side, but ultimately that injury, as I said, that's quite often something like that will be a career ender, and it's just not responsible for anyone to expect anything out of Morey at this point, other than him hopefully being happy in whatever capacity he can still be a professional footballer. I mean, maybe he needs to move down a level to gain some confidence back. There's been obviously the odd miraculous comeback from such a devastating injury here and there, but it's just not smart to bank on that in any capacity. So I would kind of consider him like a lottery ticket for Dortmund, maybe. If you get something out of it, nice. If not, well, at least he's a good lad and someone that's good to have around the team, especially like the fact that he's speaking German much better than a few very prominent players, and one of whose names I might have said 2 minutes ago, who haven't bothered really learning the language. And Morey, granted, he has had a lot more time than others, but still he took the effort, and that's something I always appreciate in players, because it shows that there's a level of identification and integration into not only a team but a club and a city and ultimately a country. As for realistic fullback options, I think I don't really have an answer for the right side right now. It's also something that I don't think there have been too many rumors over the last few months. For the left,
I've only seen the rewarmed, whatever you want to call it, rumors for Meunier to Barcelona, but nothing on the intake side.
Yeah, and the for the left side, I think it's pretty safe to say that Dortmund have a long-standing and quite concrete interest in Rami Bensebaini of Borussia Mönchengladbach, Algerian international. I think he's already scored 6 goals this season. Granted, he is the penalty taker at Gladbach, but still he gets into a lot of good situations for Gladbach. He's, I think, 27 and his contract is running out at the end of the season. So he would be a free signing. Free doesn't mean free these days because there's a lot of cash going to the player and also his agents, but still you don't pay a transfer fee. And from all I can tell, which is not necessarily bred in too much intel, Dortmund are very interested and consider their chances to be quite good that he ends up going there.
Yeah, I just want to be on the record. I'm not the biggest Bensebaini fan. I'm not entirely sure he would help Dortmund in the long term, but obviously considering or comparing it to what Dortmund have now, I have to say he's an upgrade. So there's that. But yeah, I also think he is very prone on the defensive end and makes a lot of comical individual tactical errors, if you will.
So you fit right in, Stefan. What's the point?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the point is I don't want to have any infittings. I want to have outfittings, if that makes sense. I want the defensive line being outfitted with players that do not make some weird blusters and blunders all the time. So, yeah, before I bluster on even more, I shall just move on to the next question. And that is by Jordan Hunt asking if the criticism for Watzke and co. is justified. And yeah, that is a very broad question. First of all, I want to say yes, it is. And second of all, there is a lot of question marks, and maybe you can, as a final or almost final question, shed some light on what Hans-Joachim Watzke is doing outside of Borussia Dortmund right now. Because today I woke up and I saw him at the podium of the DFL, the Deutsche Fußballliga, because the previous president, I think it was Donata Hopfen, has resigned, I think, or talked into resignation. I'm not entirely sure what the politics of this are. But nevertheless, Hans-Joachim Watzke seems to be a very busy man these days.
Yeah, I mean, this might take a while. First of all, Donata Hopfen, not president because the German Football League does no longer have a president. She was CEO. She stepped down / was made to step down after conversations. You know how these things go. Less than a year into the job.
Yeah, Donata, get the fuck out is what they said in those talks, I presume.
I wouldn't presume, but I mean, we all know that football can be a rough place, and her being a woman certainly didn't help her situation in these days, I would assume. But yeah, so she had the discussions leading to her premature exit from the post were with Watzke in Qatar, because they were both part of the German delegation, at least for some time. Watzke is the head of the, what's Aufsichtsrat, Stefan, in English?
Supervisory board?
Yeah, I guess. So not the executive board, but the one that supervises the executive board, if that makes sense. And in that capacity, Watzke is automatically also vice president of the German Football Association, the DFB. And as most listeners will have followed to an extent, following the exit of the German national team at the World Cup in Qatar, Oliver Bierhoff, who used to be team manager and was now CEO of all national teams and the new academy, which was built in Frankfurt, has stepped down. Ultimately will have been pretty much the same story as with Donata Hopfen, as in they were in talks with important people, and it will have been made quite apparent that it would be a good idea to step down. Obviously, both of them will get nice severance packages, so I don't know how much pity is in order.
0 is the exact number from my point.
Quite possibly. I don't want to put anything into anyone's mouth in terms of words, anyway. So Watzke right now had two vacancies to fill. It's now, I want to say 1.5, because the Football League is now being led on an interim basis by Axel Hellmann, who is on the board at Eintracht Frankfurt, and Oliver Lecky, who's on the board at Freiburg. And they will keep the job till the end of the season. And in that time frame, Buczko is going to be heavily involved in the search for a long-term successor of Mrs. Hopfen. And the full-on vacancy is the post that Bioff has left for Germany. There's a lot of rumors swirling around who might be interested, who might be available, who might be approached for the job. Interestingly, for a Dortmund perspective, Matthias Sammer is being talked about, even though he has made it clear time and time again that he's not willing to return to a full-time job. After his health issues forced him to step down at Bayern a few years ago, if people remember that. Someone, I think Michael Reschke, who's now an agent, but who was a technical director at Bayern, has even said that Michael Zorc would be the ideal person for this job, which A, I don't agree with, and B, good luck getting Michael Zorc out of retirement after decades at Dortmund. That's not going to happen, but yeah, so Buczko is also going to be involved in that search, so there is definitely a sense that he's right now the big man in German football, and how much time does that leave him for his responsibilities at Dortmund, where he's still obviously CEO and the big man as well, I guess. Especially given that, Dortmund have the upcoming Jude Bellingham saga, which is going to require attention.
Fun.
Yeah, it is what it is, Stefan. It's true. They also have, if the season doesn't turn out better than it has so far, they will have discussions forced upon them from the media about the future of Edin Terzic on the job and whatnot. So there's certainly an element of asking oneself whether Hans-Joachim Buczko has put too much on his plate. But I think he's old enough to handle this, and he quite enjoys the limelight. I think he wanted to be asked for the jobs at the DFL and subsequently the DFB, and now he's got to spoon out the soup he's made himself, as some would say in German.
Yes, very nice. Yeah, if I remember correctly, wasn't Buczko and Neuendorf also linked with posts in the UEFA and FIFA executive committees or something like that? So that probably be even more. And if you don't like the term supervisory board, I just looked it up. Maybe board of directors helps a little bit more. I don't know. I think it all means the same at the end of the day. There are a couple of questions which I will now ignore because we are running out of time. But lastly, Jason Q. Han has asked me about 5 minutes ago, if you're still recording, is Dortmund doomed? Follow up, why does it feel that way? Thank you, Stefan and Lars. Love the pod. Lars, if you want, you can turn this around into a high note to end on and tell us why Dortmund are not doomed, or you can just go with the flow of this question and answer that. Either way, be my guest.
Well, Stefan, as is my want on this podcast, I'm going to end on a positive note because that's what people usually refer myself to as being the positive one on this podcast.
Yes.
Dortmund aren't doomed because I don't know what doomed would entail for a football club that is a regular starter in the Champions League, that has some of the most wanted young players in the world, who has the biggest stadium in Germany, who has the best stadium in the world, according to many people, who have,
like myself,
have a reputation as a club that's an ideal stepping stone for some of the best talents in the world, and who play in a very stable league with stable ownership because it's owned by the people, at least to a large enough extent. I don't like these doom and gloom scenarios. I think clubs are doomed if they are about to be relegated by legal authorities looking at Juventus possibly. I don't know how serious their situation is. Clubs might also be doomed by being Schalke and being relegated for the second time in 3 seasons possibly. I don't know if that's going to happen. But I mean, the talks of Dortmund's demise are greatly exaggerated, typically, mostly by us as well. I think we kind of have to take some of the responsibility of our fan base being negative.
What?
That might stem from the fact that indeed we are usually not overly positive.
What? No, we're the most positive people.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, Dortmund are not doomed. Dortmund would be okay missing out on Champions League football 1 season. I don't think that's going to make or break anything. So, in Cologne,
my wife has asked me if there are even any bad consequences if Dortmund miss out on the Champions League, since they can't deal with more cash anyway. I think that's a very reasonable point.
I mean, the question would be how many players would want to leave them for Champions League football. But ultimately, I think seeing as Bellingham is definitely leaving them anyway, I think almost everyone else is replaceable. So if that's a positive, I don't know, then let that be the positive ending.
Yeah, okay, I'll take it. Thank you so much for coming on, and everyone who sent us questions, even if we didn't answer them. Thank you so much. I don't want to diss our listeners, because I was gonna say I'm actually surprised by how considerate the questions were. We've had far worse in the past, so thank you for that, and I hope you enjoyed this little Yellowwallpod back from the dead edition, because I sure as heck am still on a football hiatus, if you will, and I've not really cared much about what is going on in the black and yellow realm. So apologies that we will probably not be back unless something seismic happens, like Dortmund just firing their coach out of the blue, before the second part of the season, let's call it that, resumes, because I personally cannot be arsed, and if I cannot be arsed, I don't think there's much of another impetus to have this podcast running. So Lars, again, thank you for coming on here and answering questions alongside me, and everyone out there who is listening, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, etc., and obviously en guten Rutsch ins neue Jahr. Until then, as always, thank you for listening, and goodbye.